The bullet wasn't meant for Kang Min-ho. It was meant for the woman who proved the doctors wrong about his infertility. The woman who hated him for forgetting her name. A former stripper. Now a CEO. The mother of 5 of his children. For one brief moment he was happy. Almost in love. But happiness in his world always comes with a price. And the price is death. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories TV Besties. If you thought Season 1 of this story kept you at the edge of your seat, wait till you see the suspense Season 2 carries. Please like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you stay till the end. The bullet entered Kang Min-ho's shoulder with surgical precision, spinning him backward as the window behind him exploded into 1,000 glittering fragments. A Daisy scream tore through the office, raw, primal, a sound she didn't recognize as her own. Time fractured into terrible slow motion. Min-ho falling, his white shirt blooming red, Tae-sung throwing himself forward, children's faces transforming from hope to horror. "Get down!" Tae-sung roared, his body covering Min-ho's as more bullets punched through where the windows had been. Glass rained like deadly snow. Somewhere, an alarm began shrieking. Adaze's maternal instincts overrode everything else. She dove toward her children, gathering all 5 against her body, making herself a shield as Kwon and 2 other guards surrounded them in a protective wall. More gunshots. The sound of return fire from Min-ho's security team positioned on adjacent buildings, shouting in Korean, urgent and afraid. Then silence, sudden and more terrifying than the violence. "Sir!" Tae-sung's voice cracked with an emotion Adaze had never heard from the stoic man. "Stay with me. Someone call Dr. Han, now!" Adaze couldn't see Min-ho past the wall of bodies protecting her children, but she could hear labored breathing, Tae-sung's desperate commands, the wet sound of blood on marble. Her children were sobbing, their small bodies shaking against hers. Kira was hyperventilating. Leo was calling for his father in a voice that broke on every syllable. "I need to..." Adaze tried to move toward Min-ho, but Kwon held her back. "Ma'am, we don't know if there are more shooters. You stay with the children." "He's bleeding!" "He needs... Dr. Han is 3 minutes away. We have field medics on site. Ma'am, please, your children need you to stay calm." But Adaze couldn't be calm. She'd spent 8 years hating Kang Min-ho, and now, watching him bleed out on his own office floor while her children screamed for their father, she discovered something terrifying. She didn't want him to die. The realization hit harder than any bullet. She'd been lying to herself about the hate, about the indifference, about everything. Kwon's radio crackled. "Shooter eliminated, building secure, repeat, building secure." Only then did Kwon allow Adaze to move. She stumbled toward where Min-ho lay, her children clinging to her pajamas. Tae-sung had his hands pressed against Min-ho's shoulder, his expensive suit soaked with blood. Min-ho's face was pale but conscious, his jaw clenched against pain that must have been extraordinary. "You're not dying," Adaze said, her voice fierce despite the tears streaming down her face. She didn't know when she'd started crying. "You hear me? You don't get to meet your children and then die. That's not how this works." Min-ho's eyes found hers, and even through the pain, there was something like amusement. "Bossy," he managed through gritted teeth. "Daddy!" Naya was trying to reach him, but a guard held her back gently. "Daddy, please don't die." "Not dying," Min-ho said, his voice steadier than it should have been for a man losing blood. "Just inconvenienced." Dr. Han burst through the door with a medical team, and suddenly Adaze and her children were being ushered back, giving the professionals room to work. She watched them cut away Min-ho's shirt, watched Dr. Han's swift examination, watched the organized chaos of life-saving. "Bullet passed through," Dr. Han announced. "Missed major arteries, but he's lost significant blood. We need to move him to Seoul Medical immediately." "No hospitals," Min-ho said, his voice weaker now. "Too exposed. Private facility." "Sir, you need..." "That's an order, Dr. Han." Within minutes, they had Min-ho on a stretcher and were moving him to a private elevator that led to an underground garage a Daisy hadn't known existed. The entire floor had been locked down. Security teams moved with military precision, and Adaz, still in her pajamas and covered in blood that wasn't hers, followed with her children because she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. The private medical facility turned out to be on the top floor of another building Min-ho owned, a fully equipped hospital suite that looked more like a luxury hotel than a place for treating gunshot wounds. As they wheeled Min-ho into surgery, he caught a Daisy's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "The children," he said urgently. "Tae-sung will protect them. Trust him." "I'm not leaving you," a Daisy said, surprising herself. A Daisy, "Don't." She squeezed his hand. "Don't you dare argue with me right now. You got shot protecting my children. The least I can do is stay while they patch you up." Something flickered in Min-ho's eyes. Surprise, maybe gratitude, something softer than she'd ever seen there. Then they were wheeling him through double doors, and she was left in a waiting room with 5 traumatized children and enough security to stage a small war. The surgery took 3 hours. 3 hours where Daisy paced like a caged animal while her children huddled together on a leather sofa, silent and terrified. Tae-sung had brought them clean clothes from somewhere, designer outfits that fit perfectly because apparently Min-ho's people knew her children's sizes. The efficiency should have been creepy. Instead, it just made her heart ache. "Is Daddy going to die?" Mira asked finally, her voice so small that Adais had to crouch down to hear her properly. "No, baby. The doctors said the bullet missed anything vital. He's strong. He's going to be fine." "You don't know that," Zion said, his young face aged by fear. "People die from gunshot wounds all the time." "Not your father," Adazi said with a certainty she forced into her voice. "He's survived too much to die now." But privately, she wasn't sure. She'd seen the blood, seen the pallor of Min-ho's face, and she kept remembering the sound of the bullet impact, the way his body had jerked, the terrible moment when she'd thought she was watching the father of her children die before they'd really known him. When Dr. Han finally emerged, still in surgical scrubs, Adais was on her feet instantly. "How is he?" "Stable, lucky." The bullet trajectory was almost perfect for avoiding major damage. Another inch to the left, and we'd be having a very different conversation. He'll need time to recover, but barring complications, he should make a full recovery. The relief was so intense that Adaizi's knees actually buckled. Tae-sung caught her elbow, steadying her. "Can we see him?" she asked. "He's unconscious from the anesthesia, won't wake for a few hours, but yes, you can see him." The room they'd put Min-ho in looked less like a hospital and more like a 5-star hotel suite. The bed was massive, the equipment state-of-the-art but designed to blend into the luxury decor. Min-ho lay motionless against white sheets, his shoulder heavily bandaged, his face peaceful in unconsciousness. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking vitals that Dr. Han assured her were strong. The children crept forward like they were approaching something sacred. Naya reached out tentatively, touching Min-ho's hand where it lay on the blanket. "He's so still," she whispered. "He's healing," Adaisi said softly. "His body needs rest to get strong again." "Can we stay?" Leo asked. "Please, Amma. We don't want to leave him alone." Adaisi looked at Tai-sing, who nodded. "I'll have beds brought in, and food. You should all rest." But none of them could rest. They settled into a vigil. Adaisi, in a chair pulled close to Min-ho's bedside, her children arranged on sofas and chairs around the room. Tae-sung positioned security outside the door and in the hallway. Seoul's dawn was breaking through the windows, painting everything in soft gold light that seemed obscene, given what had just happened. "Who shot him?" Adaise asked Tae-sung quietly while the children dozed. "We're still investigating. Professional hit. High-powered rifle from a building 3 blocks away. The shooter died before we could question. Him. Poison capsule. Whoever sent him didn't want him talking." "Because of the children? Because people know Min-ho has heirs now?" "That's our working theory." Tae-sung's face was grim. In our world, children are leverage, weaknesses to exploit. The moment those 5 walked into Kang Tower, they painted targets on themselves and everyone connected to them. So this is my fault, Adaizi said, the guilt crushing. If I'd kept them away from him... They would have found another way, Tae-sung interrupted gently. Ms. Okoye, I've worked for Minho for 20 years. I've never seen him lose control of a situation until your children appeared. They're extraordinary, stubborn, brilliant. They were always going to find him. The only question was when. Daisy looked at Minho's still face, remembering how he'd stepped between the children and the windows just before the shot. Intentional or instinct? She suspected instinct, his body protecting theirs before his mind could calculate the danger. He saved them, she whispered. He'd die for them. Tae-sung said simply. I saw it in his eyes the moment he realized they were his. Minho has spent 20 years making himself invincible, but those children, and you're his vulnerability now. And in our world, vulnerabilities get people killed. Minho woke on the second day. Adaizi was at his bedside, reading reports on her tablet while the children attended virtual school sessions in an adjacent room. She didn't know what made her look up. Maybe some change in his breathing, maybe just instinct. But suddenly, his eyes were open, dark and aware and locked on her face. You're awake, she said, and hated how her voice shook. Disappointed? His voice was rough from intubation, but the dark humor was intact. Relieved, Adaze corrected, and saw surprise flicker across his face. Your children have been beside themselves. They haven't eaten properly in 2 days, haven't slept. They keep asking if you're going to die. Tell them I'm too stubborn to die. Tell them yourself. Daisy stood, intending to get the children, but Minho's hand shot out, catching her wrist. The movement made him wince, but his grip was firm. Wait, before they come in, are you all right? The glass, when the window shattered... I'm fine. Your guards protected us. Not a scratch on any of us. Minho's jaw clenched. I should have had stronger glass. Should have anticipated... You can't anticipate everything, Daisy said, and found herself sitting back down, her hand still in his. Even you can't control the entire world. I can try. His thumb moved unconsciously against her wrist, a gentle stroke that made her pulse jump. The shooter? Dead. Tae-sung says he took poison before your people could question him. Professional, expensive. Someone really wants you dead. Someone always wants me dead, Minho said with disturbing casualness. Part of the job description. That's not funny. You have children now, 5. Reasons to be more careful. I know. His eyes held hers. I'm sorry, Adaiz, for all of this. For bringing danger into their lives. For being the kind of man whose existence threatens his own children. The apology, genuine and raw, did something to Adaiz's carefully maintained defenses. She'd been prepared for arrogance, for the cold control he usually projected. Not this, not vulnerability that matched her own. I should get the children, she said, pulling her hand free before she did something stupid like cry, or worse, admit that watching him bleed had cracked something open in her chest that she'd thought safely sealed. The moment the children saw Minho awake, they erupted. All 5 of them rushed the bed, gently, mindful of his injury, but with an enthusiasm that made Adaizi's heart clench. They'd been so scared, so certain they'd lose him just as they'd found him. Daddy! Kira was crying, happy tears this time. You're okay. The doctors said you'd be okay, but I was scared they were wrong. I'm okay, little one, Minho said. And Adaiz watched something extraordinary happen. The cold, controlled crime lord disappeared, replaced by a father who looked at his children like they were the most precious things in existence. Takes more than a bullet to stop me. Who shot you? Zion asked, ever practical. And what have you done to ensure they can't try again? Minho actually laughed, then winced as the movement pulled his stitches. You sound like me at your age. We're handling it. You let me worry about the bad guys. We want to help, Naya said seriously. We're smart. We can figure out patterns, analyze data. No, both Minho and Adaizi said simultaneously, their voices overlapping. The children looked between their parents, something speculative in their expressions. You're agreeing on things now, Leo observed. That's new. Your mother and I agree that our children shouldn't be involved in hunting assassins, Minho said dryly. Beyond that, the jury's still out. But over the next week, as Minho recovered, something did shift. The children refused to leave the medical facility. They set up a schedule. Someone was always with their father, reading to him, telling him about their lives, asking questions he answered with surprising patience. They brought him flowers they'd picked from the facility's garden. They drew pictures of things they wanted to show him. They filled his recovery room with life in a way Adaizi suspected it had never known. And she watched Kang Min-ho transform. The man who'd built an empire on fear learned to braid his daughter's hair. The criminal kingpin helped with homework, his tactical mind easily handling advanced mathematics. The assassin who'd survived 3 attempts on his life before age 30 now sat through lengthy explanations of Minecraft strategies with genuine interest. He's not what I expected, Adaizi admitted to Obenya one evening. Her head of security had been rotating between her office and the medical facility, coordinating protection for both locations. What did you expect? Obina asked carefully. A monster. Adaizi watched through the window as Minho listened to Mira explain something, his full attention on his daughter. Someone cold and cruel who'd view the children as assets to control, but he's gentle with them, patient, like he's been waiting his whole life for permission to be soft. Something flickered across Obina's face, something that might have been pain. He doesn't deserve you, he said quietly, or them. He's still a criminal, Adaiz. His hands are still bloody. The fact that he can braid hair doesn't erase the people he's hurt. Adaiz turned to look at Obina properly. They'd worked together for 5 years. He'd been there when she'd first started Okoye Technologies, when she'd been desperate and terrified and pregnant with quintuplets. He'd protected her, believed in her, stayed loyal when others would have abandoned a sinking ship. She valued him, trusted him, but the intensity in his eyes right now unsettled her. Obina. I know, he said, cutting her off gently. I know I'm out of line, but I was there, Adaiz. I was there when you cried yourself to sleep while pregnant, when you worked until you collapsed because you were terrified you couldn't provide for 5 babies, when you built this empire from nothing because you refused to let circumstances define you. I saw your strength, your brilliance, and now he shows up and suddenly you're softening toward the man who caused all that pain? He didn't know about the children, Adaizi said, but her voice lacked conviction. He didn't care enough to know your real name, Obina countered. He used you and discarded you. The fact that you survived and thrived despite him doesn't make him less responsible for the initial hurt. Adaizi wanted to argue, wanted to defend Minho. But Obina wasn't wrong. The man who'd left her pregnant and alone was the same man currently teaching Leo chess strategy in the next room. Both truths existed simultaneously, contradictory and confusing. I don't know what I feel, she admitted finally. I'm angry at him for existing, grateful he survived, terrified of what his world means for our children, and underneath all of that... She stopped, unable to voice what was underneath, the attraction that hadn't died despite a decade, the way her heart had stopped when she'd seen him shot, the realization that hate and love were sometimes closer than anyone wanted to admit. I care about you, Obina said quietly, more than an employee should care about his boss, more than a friend should care about a friend. I've stayed silent because you never gave any indication you saw me that way. But watching you with him, watching you soften, I need you to know you have options, better options than a man whose world runs on violence. Before Adaiz could respond, the door opened. Minho stood there, leaning, slightly on a cane, his face pale but determined. Behind him, Tae-sung hovered protectively. How much had Min-ho heard? His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes suggested more than she'd have liked. "The children want you," Min-ho said to Adaz, his voice carefully neutral. "Apparently, there's a debate about pizza toppings that requires maternal mediation." Adaz moved past him into the room, very aware of the sudden tension. Behind her, she heard Obina say something low in Korean. Minho's response was equally quiet, but the tone was unmistakable, a threat wrapped in silk. Then footsteps, and both men were walking away in opposite directions. This was getting complicated in ways Adaeze hadn't anticipated. She'd thought the danger would come from Minho's enemies. She hadn't considered it might come from conflicts much closer to home. 3 days later, Dr. Han cleared Min-ho to leave the facility with strict instructions about rest and recovery. The children were ecstatic. They'd been planning a welcome home party with the dedication they usually reserved for science projects. Adaeze had tried to explain that Min-ho's penthouse was his home, not theirs. But the children had decided otherwise. Their family needed to be together. Therefore, Min-ho should come home with them. "That's not how it works," Adaeze had said. "Your father has his own house. We have ours." "But what if someone tries to shoot him again?" Kira asked with heartbreaking logic. "He needs people to watch over him. We can watch over him, Alma. Please?" Which was how Adaeze found herself preparing a guest room in her house for the man she'd spent 8 years avoiding. Min-ho had protested, weakly. But the children had been relentless. And truthfully, Adaz didn't hate the idea of having Min-ho where she could monitor his recovery. The man was terrible at following doctors' orders. He'd probably try to run his criminal empire from bed and tear his stitches before the week was out. The convoy that brought Min-ho to Pyeongchang-dong was even larger than before. Tae-sung had tripled security after the shooting. The quiet residential street now looked like a military installation, much to the neighbors' alarm. Adaeze had started receiving concerned calls from the neighborhood association. She'd ignored them all. Min-ho moved slowly, frustration evident in every careful step. He hated weakness. Adaeze could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his hands clenched when he had to accept help. But the children were oblivious to their father's pride, just happy to have him here. They'd transformed the guest room into something between a bedroom and a command center, complete with monitors, a specialized desk, and enough flowers to start a shop. "This is too much," Min-ho said, surveying the room. "This is what children who thought they'd lost their father do," Adaeze corrected. "Accept it graciously or break their hearts." Over the next week, a strange domesticity settled over Adaze's house. Min-ho worked from the guest room, conducting business via video calls that Adaze tried very hard not to eavesdrop on. The children rotated through his room like shifts, making sure he was never alone. Meals became family affairs, with everyone gathered around the table, while the children chattered and Min-ho listened with an attention that suggested he was memorizing every detail. Adaze found herself watching him. The way he smiled when Mira showed him a drawing. The careful patience he demonstrated when Leo asked complicated questions about business. The fierce protectiveness that flared whenever anyone mentioned the shooting. He was nothing like she'd imagined. Or maybe he was exactly what she'd once glimpsed that night 10 years ago, before life had taught her to expect the worst from men. One night, after the children were asleep, Adaze found Min-ho on the balcony. He shouldn't have been out of bed, but stubbornness apparently ran deep. The soul night spread before them, lights glittering like fallen stars. "You should be resting," she said, moving to stand beside him. "I've been resting for a week. Any more rest, and I'll go insane." Dr. Han said, "Dr. Han isn't the one trapped in a bedroom while his empire runs without him." Min-ho turned to look at her. "Though I'll admit there are worse prisons than a house filled with children who actually want me here." "They love you," Adaeze said simply. "I don't think even you can ruin that." "I'll try my best not to." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Obina is in love with you." Adaeze felt her cheeks heat. "That's not... He hasn't said He didn't have to. I've spent 20 years reading people, Daisy. He looks at you the way I look at... Minho stopped, something shifting in his expression. The way you look at what? Daisy prompted, her heart suddenly racing. But Minho had caught himself, walls slamming back into place. Nothing. Forget I said anything. No. Daisy moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne beneath the clinical scent of bandages. The way you look at what, Minho? His jaw clenched. This is a bad idea. What is? This. Us. Standing here while I'm trying very hard not to think about kissing you. The confession hung in the air between them, dangerous and intoxicating. Adaizi's breath caught. She should step back, should remind him of all the reasons this could never work, should protect her heart the way she'd been protecting it for 10 years. Then don't think, she whispered instead. Minho's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. I'm not a good man, Adaiz. I've done things that should make you run. I will do things in the future that you'll hate me for. I can't change what I am. I'm not asking you to change, Adaiz said, surprising herself. I'm just asking you to be honest about what you want. I want, Minho said softly, what I've never let myself want before. You, them, this strange, impossible family we've accidentally created, and that terrifies me more than any bullet ever could. Then he was kissing her, or maybe she was kissing him. It was impossible to tell who moved first. His mouth was hot and demanding, tasting like whiskey and danger and things she'd tried so hard to forget. The kiss deepened, years of anger and denial and stubborn attraction igniting into something that felt inevitable. They broke apart, breathing hard, Adiz's back against the balcony railing, Minho's good arm braced beside her head. This doesn't solve anything, she said breathlessly. I know. You're still a criminal, still dangerous, still everything I should protect my children from. I know, Minho said again, and I still hate you for making me want this. Good. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Hate is easier than the alternative. They stood there in the darkness, caught between what they wanted and what they knew was wise, while inside their children slept peacefully, unaware that their parents were standing on a precipice that promised to change everything. The moment shattered when Adaizi's phone rang, Obinna's name flashing on the screen. Reality crashed back in. She pulled away from Minho, answering with a voice that hopefully didn't betray what had just happened. Yes? We have a problem, Obinna said, his tone urgent. Marcus Okonkwo just landed in Seoul. Adaiz felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus. The name alone made her stomach turn with a combination of rage and fear she'd thought buried. You're sure? Immigration flagged his entry an hour ago. He's here a days, and based on the chatter we're intercepting, he's not here for tourism. Minho was watching her face, reading her reaction with that uncanny ability he had to see through masks. Who is Marcus Okonkwo? He asked quietly. Adaizi closed her eyes. She'd known this day would come eventually, known that the past she'd tried so hard to bury would rise again, but she'd hoped, foolishly, that she'd have more time. He's the man I sent to prison 5 years ago, she said finally, and if he's here, it means he's coming for revenge. Inside the house, in the carefully monitored security of guest room, Minho's laptop pinged with an incoming message. Tae Sing's face appeared on screen, his expression grim. Sir, we've identified the man who ordered your assassination. Tell me, Minho said, settling into the chair despite Adaizi's protest that he should be resting. Marcus Okonkwo, Nigerian national. He's been in Japanese custody for the past 5 years on charges of corporate espionage and technology theft, released 3 months ago on a technicality. And sir, he has connections to the Osaka syndicate. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. This wasn't just about Minho's enemies seeing vulnerability. This was personal. He knows Adaizi, Minho said. It wasn't a question. More than knows her. According to our research, Okonkwo was romantically involved with Miss Okoye 6 years ago. Brief relationship. He was using her company to legitimize operations that were essentially elaborate copyright theft, stealing tech designs and reselling them to Asian manufacturers. When she discovered what he was doing, she compiled evidence and testified against him. He went to prison. She went on to build her empire. But before sentencing, he made threats. Said he'd make her pay, said he'd destroy everything she'd built. Minho's blood went cold. He's here for her. And now he knows about the children. Sir, if he's partnered with the Osaka syndicate, then he has resources, funding, and manpower to make good on his threats. Minho stood, ignoring the pull of stitches. Double security on the house. I want eyes on every approach. And Tae-sung, find out where Okonkwo is staying. I want to know every move he makes before he makes it. After disconnecting, Minho found Adaize in the kitchen, making tea with hands that shook slightly. He'd sent Obinna away, perhaps more curtly than necessary, and now they were alone with truths that needed speaking. Tell me about Marcus Okonkwo, Minho said. Adaize didn't turn around. What do you want to know? Everything. Start from the beginning. So she did. The story came out slowly, painfully, how she'd been struggling to keep Okoye Technologies afloat 6 years ago, working impossible hours while raising 5 toddlers, how Marcus had seemed like a blessing at first, another Nigerian expat who understood the challenges of building a life in Korea, how their friendship had turned romantic, briefly, until she'd started noticing inconsistencies in his story, contracts that didn't add up, money moving in ways that seemed wrong. I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense, Adazi said. I investigated, and I found out he was using his connection to me to steal proprietary designs from my company and sell them to manufacturers in Osaka. He'd been doing it for months, cost me millions in lost revenue and nearly destroyed my reputation. So you turned him in, Minho said. I compiled evidence and handed it to the authorities. He went to prison. I thought that was the end of it. Adaize finally turned to face him, but 2 weeks before his sentencing, he sent me a letter, said I'd pay for betraying him, said he'd make me watch everything I built turn to ashes, said he'd make me beg for mercy I wouldn't receive. I was terrified. But then he went to prison and the threats stopped, and I thought maybe I was safe. You're not safe, Minho said flatly. Not if he's partnered with Osaka. They're one of the most powerful syndicates in Asia, and if he's convinced them that hurting you hurts me, then I've painted an even bigger target on myself and my children. Adaize's laugh was bitter. So now I have your enemies and my own. That's just perfect. Minho moved closer, his good hand coming up to tilt her chin. Listen to me. Marcus Okonkwo doesn't know who he's up against. He thinks you're alone. He thinks he can intimidate you the way he did 6 years ago. But you're not alone anymore. Those children have a father who will burn down the world before he lets anyone hurt them. And you have someone who knows exactly how to deal with men like Okonkwo. By doing what? Killing him? That's not who I am, Minho. I don't solve problems with violence. Then it's fortunate you have someone who does, Minho said softly. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not. I'm asking you to let me protect what's mine. I'm not yours, Adaz protested, but the words lacked conviction. Aren't you? His thumb traced her lower lip. Because 15 minutes ago on the balcony, you kissed me like you were mine. Like maybe you'd been mine since that night 10 years ago and we've just been too stubborn to admit it. Adaize wanted to deny it, wanted to maintain the walls she'd built so carefully, but standing in her kitchen at midnight with the taste of him still on her lips and the knowledge that danger was closing in, the walls seemed less important than the truth. Even if I was yours, and I'm not saying I am, what does that mean? You live in a world of violence. I've spent 8 years building a life of peace. How do those things coexist? Carefully, Minho said, and probably with a lot of arguments. Despite everything, Adaiz almost smiled. You're impossible. You're magnificent, Minho countered. You're brilliant and fierce, and you built an empire while raising quintuplets alone. You survived me, survived Marcus, survived circumstances that would have broken anyone else. Magnificent doesn't even begin to cover it. The words undid something in Adaiz's chest, some final defense she'd been clinging to. She'd spent so long believing she was damaged, used, defined by the worst moments of her life. But Minho looked at her like she was a warrior, like survival itself was a form of victory. I can't do this right now, she said, but she didn't step away. There's too much happening, too many threats. I need to focus on keeping my children safe. Our children, Minho corrected gently, and I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you hate me when we both know that's not true anymore. Before Adaiz could respond, small footsteps sounded in the hallway. Moments later, Kira appeared, rubbing her eyes. Amma? I had a bad dream. About the loud noises when Daddy got hurt. Instantly, both parents moved toward her. Minho, despite his injury, was surprisingly quick. He scooped Kira up with his good arm, settling her against his chest. You're safe, little one. I promise. Bad dreams can't hurt you. But bad men can, Kira said with the terrible wisdom of a child who'd witnessed violence. They hurt you. What if they come back? Then they'll have to go. Through an army of very angry people who won't let that happen, Minho said firmly. Your mother, me, Tae Sung, and all his men, we're all working to keep you safe. Adaiz watched father and daughter, something tightening in her chest. Minho had only known these children for weeks, but he held Kira like she was the most precious thing in existence, like he'd fight gods and monsters to keep her safe. And maybe he would. Maybe that was exactly what being Kang Minho's daughter meant. Can I sleep with you and Amma tonight? Kira asked. I don't want to be alone. The request was innocent, but it created an immediate problem. Kira thought her parents shared a room, a natural assumption for a child. Minho's eyes met Adaizi's over their daughter's head, and she saw the question there. They could correct her, explain that Minho was just a guest, or they could let it slide for one night, give a frightened child the comfort she needed. Of course you can, Adaizi said before she could overthink it. Come on, baby, let's all get some sleep. Which was how Adaizi found herself in her own bed with Minho on one side and Kira curled between them. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt oddly natural. A family unit she'd never planned but somehow needed. Minho's hand found hers across their daughter's sleeping form, his fingers threading through hers, and Adaiz let herself hold on. Just for tonight, she told herself. Tomorrow she'd rebuild her defenses. Tomorrow she'd remember all the reasons this couldn't work. But tonight, with danger circling and her daughter's nightmares still fresh, she let herself pretend they were a real family. That the man across from her was more than a criminal kingpin. That maybe, impossibly, love could grow in the scorched earth of their past. Morning brought reality crashing back. Adaiz woke to find Kira gone and the bed beside her empty, except for a note in Minho's sharp handwriting. Meeting with Tae Sung. Don't let the children go anywhere without security. M. She found her children in the kitchen, all 5 of them gathered around the table with serious expressions that immediately set off her maternal alarm. What's wrong? Kids at school are talking, Naya said without preamble. About Daddy, about the shooting. Someone leaked information about what happened. And they're saying mean things, Mira added, her voice small. That our daddy is a bad man. That we're going to grow up bad too because of him. Adaiz felt fury ignite in her chest. Her children were 8 years old. They should be worried about homework and play dates, not dealing with prejudice about their father's reputation. What people say doesn't define who you are, she said firmly. Your father is complicated. He's made choices I don't always agree with, but he loves you. That's what matters. "Do you love him?" Leo asked with characteristic directness. The question froze Adai's mid-breath. 5 pairs of eyes, so like their fathers, watched her expectantly. "That's complicated too," she said finally. "But you kissed him," Zion said. "We saw you on the balcony last night." Of course they had. Her children were brilliant, observant, and apparently impossible to hide things from. "Yes, I kissed him. But that doesn't mean—" "It means you like him," Kira said with the simple logic of childhood. "Mr. Obinna likes you too. He told us we could call him Uncle Obinna if we wanted. He brings us candy and asks about school, and he makes you smile." "Mr. Obinna is a good man," Adaizi said carefully. "He's been a loyal friend and employee." "But you don't kiss him," Naya observed, "so you must like Daddy more." Relationships are more complicated than just kissing, Adaiz tried to explain, even as she felt the conversation spiraling beyond her control. "Mr. Obinna and I have a professional relationship built on respect and—" "Do you love Daddy or not?" Leo interrupted, his young face serious. "Because if you do, you should tell him. Life is short. You told us that when Grandma died. You said we should never leave important words unsaid." Adaiz looked at her children, these brilliant, stubborn, impossibly perceptive children, and realized she was cornered by her own parenting philosophy. She'd always encouraged honesty, open communication, expressing feelings. Now they were using those lessons against her. "I don't know what I feel about your father," she admitted. "I'm angry at him for things that happened before you were born. I'm grateful he's trying to protect us. I'm scared of what his world means for your future. And yes, I'm attracted to him. But love requires trust, and I'm not sure I trust him yet." "But you could," Mira said hopefully. "Maybe. Eventually." Before Adaiz could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the security monitors, she saw Obinna standing on her doorstep, his expression grave. She excused herself, leaving the children with strict instructions to finish breakfast. "We need to talk," Obinna said the moment she opened the door. "Privately." They moved to her home office, the one room in the house that wasn't monitored by Minho's security systems, a small rebellion she'd insisted on. Obinna closed the door and turned to face her with an intensity that made her nervous. "I know about Marcus," he said without preamble, "and I know what Kang is planning." "What is he planning?" "He's going after Marcus himself. Tonight. He's coordinating with his people to track Marcus's location and eliminate the threat." Obinna's hands clenched into fists. "Adaizi, he's going to kill him. Maybe not personally, he's still recovering from the shooting, but he's giving orders that will result in Marcus's death." Adaiz felt sick. "He can't. If Marcus dies and it's traced back to Minho, then nothing happens, because Kang Minho is untouchable," Obinna cut in bitterly. "That's the world he operates in. People disappear, threats are eliminated, and the rest of us are just supposed to accept it as the cost of his protection." "I'll talk to him. Tell him there has to be another way." "There is another way," Obinna said quietly. "Leave him. Take your children somewhere safe, somewhere his world can't touch you. I have resources, contacts in other countries. I can help you disappear, start over, build a new life where your children aren't defined by their father's crimes." Adaizi stared at him. "You're asking me to run away. I'm asking you to save yourself and your children from a life of violence." Obinna moved closer, his voice dropping. "I've watched you for 5 years, Adaiz. Watched you build something extraordinary from nothing. You're strong enough to survive without him. You always have been." "But my children love him," Adaiz said softly. "They've spent 8 years wondering about their father, and now they've found him. How do I take that away from them?" "By remembering what kind of man he is. By remembering that men like Kang Minho destroy everything they touch eventually." Obinna's hand came up, cupping her face. "You deserve better than him. Your children deserve better." "Obinna, I love you," he said, the words finally spoken after years of silence. I've loved you since the day you hired me and looked at me like I was someone worth trusting instead of just another security guard. I've loved you through every late night, every crisis, every moment of watching you be extraordinary. And I know I'm not rich or powerful or dangerous like he is, but I would never hurt you. I would never bring violence into your children's lives. I would just love you completely for as long as you'd let me. The confession hung between them, beautiful and painful and impossible. Adayez felt tears prick her eyes. You're a good man, Obinna. One of the best I've ever known. But you love him, Obinna finished, his voice breaking slightly. Even though you shouldn't. Even though he's everything wrong for you. You love him anyway. I don't know if it's love, Adayez said honestly, but it's something. Something that's been there since the night we met 10 years ago. Something I tried to bury and couldn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Obinna stepped back, his face carefully neutral now. Don't apologize. You can't control who you love. He moved toward the door, then paused. But Adayez, when this goes wrong, and it will go wrong because men like him always destroy what they love, I'll still be here. I'll always be here. Then he was gone, leaving Adayez alone with the weight of words that changed everything and nothing. She'd known, on some level, about Obinna's feelings, but hearing them spoken made them real, made her complicit in hurting someone who'd been nothing but loyal. She found Minho in the guest room on a video call with Tae-sung. He disconnected when he saw her face. What happened? Obinna told me you're planning to kill Marcus. Minho's expression didn't change. Obinna should learn to keep his mouth shut. Is it true? Yes. No hesitation, no attempt to soften it. Marcus Okonkwo tried to have me killed. That bullet was meant to eliminate me so he'd have clear access to you and the children. In my world, that kind of threat gets one response. In my world, we use courts and evidence and legal systems, Adayez shot back. Your world is a luxury afforded by people like me, who keep the real monsters at bay, Minho said, his voice hard. You think the legal system can touch Marcus now? He's partnered with the Osaka Syndicate. He has resources, protection, and motivation to destroy you. Courts take years. By the time your legal system does anything, he'll have already hurt our children. So your solution is murder? My solution is protecting my family by any means necessary. Minho stood, moving toward her despite the obvious pain the movement caused. I won't apologize for that. This is who I am, Adayez. This is what I do. I eliminate threats before they can manifest. And what does that make you? Adayez demanded. A hero? A protector? Or just another killer who justifies violence with pretty words about family? Minho flinched like she'd struck him. I'm a monster. I've always been a monster. I thought you understood that. I understand you're a man making choices. Bad choices. Choices that will scar our children if they ever learn their father is a murderer. They won't learn that from me, Minho said quietly. They'll learn that their father kept them safe. That's all they need to know. That's not all they need to know. Adayez's voice rose. They need to know right from wrong. They need to know that violence isn't the answer to every problem. They need to grow up believing the world is more than just power and fear. Then teach them that, Minho said. Teach them softness and morality and all the things I can't give them. But don't ask me to leave them vulnerable while I do it. Don't ask me to be something I'm not. They stood facing each other, the space between them filled with incompatible worldviews and desires that couldn't coexist. Adayez wanted to scream, wanted to make him understand that love couldn't grow in soil soaked with blood. But looking at his face, at the man who'd taken a bullet protecting children he barely knew, she saw something that terrified her. He wasn't going to change. This was who Kang Min-ho was, and she had to decide if she could love him anyway. If you kill Marcus, she said finally, her voice steady despite the tears threatening, if you cross that line while you're living under my roof and building a relationship with our children, I won't forgive you. I'll take the children somewhere you can't find us. I'll disappear so completely that even your resources won't be enough. Do you understand me? Minho's jaw clenched. You're asking me to choose between your approval and their safety. I'm asking you to find another way. You're supposed to be brilliant, one of the most powerful men in Asia. Surely you can think of a solution that doesn't involve murder. For a long moment, Minho just stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. I'll find another way. But Adiz, if Marcus makes a move against you or the children, all bets are off. I won't let morality get them killed. Fair enough, Adiz said, though her heart was heavy. But Minho, figure out what you want, because you can't have both. You can't be the monster and the father. Eventually, you'll have to choose. She left him standing in the guest room, surrounded by monitors and reports, and the weight of a reputation built on fear. And she went to her children, who were still at the breakfast table, and tried to pretend their world wasn't balanced on a knife's edge between love and violence. That afternoon, Minho made a call that surprised everyone. Instead of ordering Marcus's elimination, he contacted his lawyers, the expensive, ruthless kind who could make legal miracles happen. Within hours, they'd compiled new evidence about Marcus's partnership with the Osaka syndicate, his illegal activities since leaving prison, and connections to the assassination attempt. We're building a case, Tae-sung explained to Adiz that evening. Ironclad evidence that will put Marcus away for 20 years minimum. It'll take a few days to finalize, but once we hand it to prosecutors, the legal system handles it. Adiz finished, surprised. Minho is really doing this? He is, Tae-sung confirmed. Though I should mention, the evidence we're compiling may have been obtained through creative means, security footage from locations that didn't technically authorize our access, financial records that may have been acquired through channels that aren't strictly legal, but the evidence itself is real. That's what matters. It wasn't perfect. It was probably still illegal in about 12 different ways, but it was better than murder. It was Minho trying to meet her halfway, in the only way he knew how. That night, after the children were asleep, Adiz found Minho on the balcony again. He shouldn't have been out of bed, but she was learning that telling Kang Minho what to do was an exercise in futility. Thank you, she said quietly, moving to stand beside him, for finding another way. Don't thank me yet. Marcus still has 3 days before we hand over the evidence. A lot can happen in 3 days. But you're trying. That's what matters. Minho turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. You matter, he said simply. What you think of me, what you want for our children. It matters more than anything has mattered in 20 years. That terrifies me, but there it is. I don't want to change you, Adiz said carefully. I just want you to choose us over the violence when you can. Not always. I'm not naive enough to think your world allows for always. But sometimes, when there are other options. I'll try, Minho promised. That's all I can offer. It's enough, Adiz said. And then, because life was short and danger was close, and she was tired of pretending, Minho, I lied earlier. When I said I didn't know what I felt for you, I do know. I've known since I woke up 10 years ago and you were gone, and I realized I was hoping you'd stayed. I'm terrified of it. I hate myself for it, but He kissed her before she could finish, pulling her close despite his injury, his mouth demanding and gentle all at once. This time there was no hesitation, no walls, just two people who'd been fighting gravity for too long, finally letting themselves fall. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Minho pressed his forehead to hers. "Say it," he whispered. "I need to hear you say it." "I love you," Adaizi said, the words feeling like surrender and victory all at once. "I love you even though you're impossible and dangerous and probably the worst choice I could make. I love you anyway." "I love you too," Minho said, and she heard the wonder in his voice. "I didn't think I could. Didn't think I had that in me anymore. But Adiz, you and these children, you've made me human again." They stood there in the soul night, two people from impossible circumstances finding something precious in the wreckage of their past. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Marcus was still a threat. Minho's world still loomed, but tonight they had this, a confession spoken in darkness, a love neither had planned but both desperately needed. Inside the house, 5 children slept peacefully, unaware that their parents had just crossed a threshold that would change everything. And in a hotel across the city, Marcus Okonkwo reviewed surveillance photos of Adaizi's house and smiled. He'd been patient for 5 years. He could be patient a little longer. But soon, very soon, he'd show her exactly what happened to people who betrayed him. The war for Adeze Okoye's heart and life was just beginning, and in Seoul's shadowed spaces, forces were gathering that would test every love, loyalty, and choice made on that balcony under the stars. The next morning arrived with deceptive peace. Adaz woke to find Minho's side of the bed empty again, but this time there was a fresh coffee on her nightstand and a note that made her smile despite everything. Went to physical therapy. Tae-sung is driving me. Don't worry, I'm being responsible. The children want pancakes. M. She found all 5 children already dressed for school, gathered around the kitchen table with Minho, who was awkwardly flipping pancakes one-handed, while they offered enthusiastic and contradictory advice. You have to flip it higher, Daddy, Kira insisted. No, lower. You're going to hit the ceiling, Leo countered. Maybe Daddy should use both hands, Mira suggested gently, eyeing his injured shoulder with concern. Daddy's doing great, Naya said loyally, even as a pancake landed half on the plate, half on the counter. Minho caught Adaizi's eye across the kitchen, and something passed between them, a shared moment of domesticity that felt miraculous. This man who'd ordered operations worth billions and commanded an empire built on fear was making lopsided pancakes for their children, and somehow that meant more than any grand gesture ever could. Need help? Adaiz offered. I need many things, Minho said dryly. Help, medical intervention, possibly divine assistance, but I'm determined to master pancakes if it kills me. Please don't die making breakfast, Zion said seriously. That would be embarrassing for everyone. The laughter that followed felt like healing. For just this moment, they were a normal family dealing with normal breakfast chaos. The danger circling outside seemed distant, manageable, something that couldn't touch them here. But peace never lasted long in Kang Min-ho's world. Adaiz was dropping the children at school, with 3 security vehicles accompanying them, much to the other parents' alarm, when her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her accept the call. Hello, Jennifer, a voice said in English, smooth and familiar and wrong. Or should I say, Adaiz? I forget which name you're using now. Marcus. Daiz's blood turned to ice. She pulled the car over immediately, not trusting herself to drive. How did you get this number? I have resources, my dear, just like your new boyfriend, though I have to say I'm impressed. You've traded up from desperate stripper to MAFIA king's mistress. That's quite an upgrade. What do you want, Marcus? What I've always wanted. Justice. You destroyed my life, sent me to prison, took everything from me. Now I'm going to return the favor. His voice dropped, becoming something dark and poisonous. Those children of yours, they're beautiful, smart too. I've been watching them. The boy, Zion, he has your eyes. And little Kira, she's so trusting. Smiled at me yesterday when I walked past their school. Terror unlike anything Adazi had ever felt seized her chest. Stay away from my children. Or what? You'll send me to prison again? I'm already a convicted felon, Jennifer. I have nothing left to lose. But you have everything to lose. 5 precious reasons that laugh and play and have no idea their mother's sins are about to come home to roost. If you touch them, you'll do what? Set your criminal boyfriend on me? Please do. I'm counting on it. The moment Kang Min-ho makes a move against me, I have evidence ready to leak that will destroy both of you. Photos of you from Club Azure that make the first leak look tame. Financial records showing how you've been laundering money through your company. Records I fabricated, of course, but good luck proving that. By the time the truth comes out, your reputation will be ashes and those children will be taken by social services. You're bluffing, Adaiz said, but her voice shook. Am I? Test me and find out. I've spent 5 years planning this, Jennifer. 5 years thinking about nothing but making you suffer the way you made me suffer. And now I finally have the leverage to do it. He paused, letting the threat sink in. Enjoy your little family while you can. It won't last much longer. The call disconnected. Adaiz sat in her car, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Marcus had been watching her children, had been close enough to see them, smile at them. The violation was so complete that she felt physically sick. She called Min-ho immediately. He answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with concern. What's wrong? Marcus called me. He's been watching the children. He threatened them, Min-ho. He's been close enough to... Her voice broke. Where are you? 2 blocks from the school. I pulled over. Stay there. I'm sending Kwon to you now. Don't move. Don't go anywhere. I'm handling this. Min-ho, you promised... I promised I'd find another way if I could, Min-ho cut in, his voice cold in a way she hadn't heard since they'd first met. He just eliminated "if I could" by threatening our children. All bets are off. The call ended. 10 seconds later, Kwon's vehicle appeared, flanking hers. 2 more pulled up behind. They'd been closer than she'd realized. Min-ho's protection working invisibly, constantly. Kwon approached her window, his face professionally neutral, but his eyes concerned. Ma'am, Mr. Kang wants you to return home. I'll follow with 2 vehicles. The others will maintain surveillance on the school. The children are surrounded by 8 guards who've been briefed on Marcus Okonkwo. No one gets within 50 feet of them without being identified and cleared. Ma'am, your children are as safe as we can make them. Adaiz wanted to argue, wanted to pull her children out of school, lock them in the house, never let them out of her sight again. But she'd learned enough about Min-ho's world to know that fear could paralyze as effectively as any weapon. Marcus wanted her scared, wanted her to make mistakes, create vulnerabilities he could exploit. So she drove home with shaking hands, Kwon's vehicle a reassuring presence in her rearview mirror. And when she walked into her house to find Min-ho in the living room, surrounded by Tae-sung and a half-dozen men she didn't recognize, she saw the monster he'd warned her about. Gone was the man who'd fumbled with pancakes. This was Kang Min-ho in his element, cold, controlled, radiating the kind of menace that made grown men nervous. He was issuing orders in rapid Korean, his voice steady despite the injury that had to be screaming in protest. Maps were spread across her coffee table, surveillance photos of Marcus, location data, financial records. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment something human flickered in his eyes. You're safe. For now, Adazi said. Min-ho, he was at their school. He saw them, talked about them by name. How long has he been watching? We're checking security footage now, but Adaiz, I need you to trust me to handle this. Handle it how? Min-ho glanced at the men around him, then walked over to her, guiding her gently into the hallway where they had privacy. I'm not going to kill him. You asked me not to, and I'm honoring that. But I am going to make him disappear. That's the same thing. It's not, Min-ho interrupted. Killing him makes him a martyr, makes him a victim that his Osaka partners might avenge. But if Marcus Okonkwo simply vanishes, if he's found in a country with no extradition treaty, holding evidence that incriminates the Osaka syndicate, then he becomes a liability they'll want nothing to do with. Adaizi tried to process what he was saying. You're going to frame him? I'm going to give law enforcement evidence of his actual crimes, crimes he really committed, and ensure he's arrested somewhere that will keep him locked up for the next 20 years. No murder, no martyrdom, just a man facing consequences for his actions in a jurisdiction that doesn't care about his connections. That's still illegal. Still manipulation of... It's justice, Minho said firmly. Maybe not legal justice, but justice nonetheless. He threatened our children, Adequacy. He crossed a line that doesn't get uncrossed. I'm giving you the cleanest solution I can manage, but I won't apologize for protecting our family. Hades looked at his face, at the man who loved her children enough to attempt pancakes and loved her enough to find alternatives to murder. He wasn't perfect. His methods were questionable at best, but he was trying. In his own way, in his own world, he was trying to be better. How long will it take? 48 hours. We have teams moving into position now. By Friday, Marcus Okonkwo will be arrested in Manila on charges of intellectual property theft, corporate espionage, and fraud. The evidence is ironclad, his actual crimes, not fabrications. The Philippines has strong enforcement and no sympathy for white-collar criminals. He'll spend the next 2 decades in prison there. And the Osaka Syndicate? Will sever all ties the moment they realize he's been compromised. They don't protect liabilities. Minho's hand came up, cupping her face. Trust me, please. I know my world terrifies you, and it should, but I know how to navigate it. Let me do what I do best. Daisy closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Everything in her education, her morality, her carefully constructed life said this was wrong. But everything in her heart, the part that loved these children and impossibly loved this man, said it was necessary. 48 hours, she agreed finally. But Minho, if this goes wrong... It won't, he promised. I've spent 20 years making sure plans don't go wrong. Trust that, if nothing else. He kissed her forehead and returned to the living room, back to being the criminal kingpin issuing orders that would reshape a man's life. And Adaze stood in the hallway, wondering when exactly she'd crossed from victim to accomplice, and whether love was supposed to feel this much like falling. That evening, the children came home to find their house transformed into something resembling a fortress. More guards, more cameras, security protocols that meant they couldn't step outside without escorts. They noticed immediately. These brilliant children miss nothing. Why are there so many new people? Naya asked during dinner, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Increased security, Minho said calmly. Just a precaution. Precaution against what? Zion pressed. Adaze and Minho exchanged glances. They discussed this. How much to tell the children? Complete honesty felt cruel. But these were the same children who'd hacked corporate security to find their father. Lies wouldn't satisfy them. There's a man who wants to hurt our family, Adaze said carefully. Someone from my past who's angry about choices I made years ago. Your father is making sure he can't get close to any of us. Is it Marcus Okonkwo? Leo asked, and both parents froze. How do you know that name? Minho asked, his voice very calm and very dangerous. We heard you talking to Tae-sung earlier, Mira admitted. We weren't trying to eavesdrop, but your voices carried, and we heard the name. So we researched him, Zion added matter-of-factly. Nigerian businessman convicted of corporate espionage 5 years ago, recently released from prison. And before anyone gets mad, we just use Google, basic internet search, nothing illegal. Adaze dropped her head into her hands. You're 8 years old. 8-year-olds shouldn't be researching convicted criminals. We're not normal 8-year-olds, Naya pointed out. And this man threatened our family. We have a right to know who he is. You have a right to be children, Minho said, his voice softer than Adaze expected. To worry about homework and friends, not about dangerous men making threats. That's my job. Protecting you is my job. But you got shot doing that job, Kira said, her voice small. What if it happens again? What if next time you die? The question hung in the air, terrible in its simplicity. What if? What if Minho's luck ran out? What if his enemies found a vulnerability? What if these children who just found their father lost him again permanently? I'm not going to die, Minho said with a certainty Adaeze wished she felt. I've survived too much to let some angry man take me out now. You're stuck with me, all of you, for a very long time. Promise? Kira asked. I promise, Minho said, and Adayazi saw him make that promise like a vow, like he'd will himself to survive through sheer stubbornness if necessary. After dinner, after the children had reluctantly gone to do homework under the watchful eyes of private tutors Minho had hired, Adaze found herself alone with Minho in the kitchen. They moved around each other with practiced ease now, her washing dishes while he dried one-handed, a domestic rhythm that felt impossibly normal. They're scared, Adaeze said quietly. They should be. Fear keeps people careful. They're children, Minho. They shouldn't have to be careful. They're my children, Minho corrected gently, which means they were born into a world that requires caution. I hate that for them. But I can't change what I am, only how I protect them from it. Do you ever regret it? Adaze asked. The life you chose? The empire you built? Minho was quiet for a long moment, carefully drying a plate with methodical precision. I didn't choose this life so much as survive into it. My father was a monster who groomed me to be his weapon. I could have walked away, maybe, found some normal life. But I was good at this, better than good. And once you're good at surviving in a world like mine, walking away feels like weakness. And now, knowing what it costs? Now I have 5 reasons to wish I'd made different choices, Minho said, setting down the plate. But I can't unmake the past. All I can do is use what I've built to protect what matters. That empire you hate, it's the only thing standing between our children and people who'd hurt them just to hurt me. So no, I don't regret it. I just regret that it has to touch them. Adaeze turned to face him, drying her hands on a towel. Last night, on the balcony, I told you I loved you. I meant it. But Minho, I need you to understand something. I love who you are with our children. The man who makes pancakes and helps with homework and looks at them like they're miracles. But I'm terrified of who you are when you walk out that door. The man who orders operations and makes people disappear and lives in a world where violence is just another business tool. They're the same person, Minho said quietly. I'm both those men, Adaeze. You can't love one without accepting the other. I know, Adaeze whispered. That's what terrifies me. Minho moved closer, his good hand coming up to cup her face. I can't promise I'll never scare you. Can't promise my world won't touch yours in ways you hate. But I can promise that everything I do, every choice I make, will be about keeping you and those children safe. That has to be enough, because it's all I have to offer. It's enough, Adaeze said, though she wasn't sure if she was lying to him or herself. It has to be. They stood there in the kitchen, the warm smell of dish soap and the distant sound of their children's voices creating a pocket of normal in a profoundly abnormal situation. And Adaeze let herself hold on to him, this impossible man who'd somehow become essential. The next day, Adaeze had to go into the office for an emergency board meeting. The scandal around her past had created investor concerns that required her personal attention. She'd wanted to cancel, to stay home with the children, but Minho had been surprisingly insistent. You can't let Marcus disrupt your life, he'd said. That gives him power. Go to your meeting. Show your board that you're still the brilliant CEO they invested in. The children will be safe. I'm staying here with them. So Adaeze found herself in Okoye Technologies' sleek conference room, facing 8 board members whose expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile. The meeting started civil enough. Questions about security measures, concerns about reputation management, suggestions for crisis PR. But 20 minutes in, one of the board members, an older man named Park, decided to go for the throat. Let's address the elephant in the room, Park said in Korean, his voice dripping with disdain. Your relationship with Kang Min-ho is becoming a liability. Our stock has dropped 12% since news broke about your involvement with him. Investors don't want to be associated with organized crime. My personal life, Adaeze began, but Park cut her off. Your personal life became our business when you made a criminal your partner and the father of your illegitimate children. The word illegitimate was said with particular venom. This company has a reputation to protect. We can't afford to be seen as mob adjacent. I built this company, Adazi said, her voice dangerously calm. While you were comfortably invested in established tech firms, I was coding until 3 a.m. with 5 infants sleeping in the next room. I turned a startup worth nothing into a $200 million enterprise. So before you lecture me about liability, remember whose vision you're profiting from. Vision doesn't matter if the company becomes untouchable, another board member, Lee, added. We're already seeing contract cancellations. Partners are nervous. Adaze, we respect what you've built, but we need to discuss succession planning. Perhaps taking a step back from the CEO role until the scandal blows over. You want to push me out of my own company? Adazi's voice was ice now. Because I dared to have a complicated personal life? Because the father of my children isn't conventionally acceptable? We're suggesting a temporary leave of absence, Park said smoothly, for the good of the company. You'd retain your shares, of course, but operational control would shift to... The conference room door opened. Obinna stood there, his face urgent. Ma'am, I apologize for interrupting, but there's an emergency. Adazi was on her feet instantly, her heart in her throat. The children are fine, Obinna said quickly, but Mr. Kang wants you home immediately. Without a word to her board, Adazi grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Behind her, Park sputtered something about disrespect and fiduciary duty. She didn't care. Whatever was happening, it was more important than corporate politics. The drive home took 15 minutes that felt like hours. Obinna drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When they finally pulled up to her house, Adazi saw immediately that something had changed. More vehicles, more guards, and standing on her front porch, looking at something on the ground, was Minho, with an expression that made her blood run cold. She was out of the car before Obinna had fully stopped, running toward Minho. What happened? Minho held up a hand, stopping her before she could reach the porch. Don't come closer. There's glass. That's when she saw it. A brick sitting on her welcome mat wrapped in paper, and written on that paper in red marker that looked disturbingly like blood were 5 words. Your children die at sunset. Adazi felt the world tilt. Minho caught her before she could fall, his good arm surprisingly strong. The children, she managed, are inside with Tae-sung, safe. This was discovered 15 minutes ago by perimeter security. Adazi... Minho turned her to face him, his eyes blazing with fury barely contained. You need to trust me now, completely. No more questions about methods or morality. Just trust that I will handle this. It's only noon, Adazi whispered, staring at the brick. We have 6 hours. He's giving us 6 hours to be terrified. He's giving us 6 hours to make a mistake, Minho corrected. Fear makes people sloppy. But Marcus doesn't know who he's dealing with. I've spent 20 years turning fear into a weapon. He wants to play psychological games? I invented them. Minho's phone rang. He answered it, listened for 10 seconds, and a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that made Adazi understand exactly why people feared him. Tae-sung found him, he said after disconnecting. Marcus is at a hotel in Itaewon. Thinks he's clever, hiding in a foreign district where he blends in. He doesn't know we've had surveillance on every hotel in Seoul since he landed. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment he threatened our family, Minho said flatly. I'm going to make him wish he'd stayed in prison. Before Adazi could respond, Minho was issuing orders in rapid Korean. Men moved with military precision. Vehicles started. Weapons were checked with practiced efficiency. This was Kang Min-ho's world in action. Organized, ruthless, terrifyingly effective. I'm coming with you, Adazi said. Absolutely not. He threatened my children. I deserve to face him. You deserve to stay safe, Minho countered. Daisy, this isn't a negotiation. You stay here, with the children, behind multiple layers of security. I'll handle Marcus. By doing what? Torturing him? Killing him despite your promises? By showing him that he picked the wrong family to threaten, Minho said, his voice dropping to something cold and final. Trust me, Adaze. For once, just trust that I know what I'm doing. He kissed her. Hard, possessive, a promise and a goodbye, and then he was gone, sliding into a vehicle with Tae-sung and disappearing down the street with a convoy that looked more like a military operation than anything else. A Daisy stood on her porch, staring at the brick that promised her children's deaths, and felt something inside her shift. She'd been trying so hard to maintain her moral high ground, to keep herself separate from Minho's world, but Marcus had just proven that separation was an illusion. Her children were targets whether she approved of Minho's methods or not. Her company was being weaponized against her. Her peace was a fragile thing that could shatter with a brick and 5 words. Maybe it was time to stop fighting Minho's protection and start accepting that some battles required weapons she'd never wanted to hold. She went inside to find her children in the living room, surrounded by guards, their faces pale but calm. They'd heard about the threat. Of course they had. Her brilliant children heard everything. Is Daddy going to kill him? Zion asked without preamble. I don't know, Adaz admitted, but he's going to make sure Marcus can never threaten us again. Good, Naya said fiercely. Anyone who threatens our family deserves whatever they get. The casual acceptance of violence from her 8-year-old's mouth should have horrified Adaz. Instead, it just made her sad. Her children were losing their innocence, learning too young that the world contained real monsters, and sometimes monsters had to be fought with monster methods. Come here, Adazi said, gathering all 5 children close. Whatever happens today, remember this. Your father loves you. Everything he's doing is about keeping you safe. The methods might be scary, but the motivation is love. Never doubt that. We don't. Mira said softly. We know Daddy is dangerous, but he's dangerous for us, not to us. There's a difference. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds, Adazi thought, wisdom she was still learning, spoken as simple fact by children who understood their father better than she did. All they could do now was wait for sunset, wait for Minho to return, wait to see if love and violence could coexist, or if one would inevitably destroy the other. The clock on the wall ticked toward evening, each second feeling like an eternity. 4 hours later, Minho walked through Adazi's front door covered in blood that wasn't his. Adazi was on her feet instantly, her heart in her throat, but Minho held up a hand. It's not mine. I'm fine. The children? Upstairs. I told them to stay in their rooms until you returned. Adazi's eyes scanned him frantically. What happened? Is Marcus arrested? Minho said flatly. By Philippine authorities at Incheon Airport attempting to board a flight to Manila. They found evidence of multiple crimes in his luggage. Evidence he definitely didn't pack himself. He'll be extradited within 48 hours and spend the next 20 years in a Philippine prison. The Osaka syndicate has already cut all ties. He's alone, powerless, and no longer our problem. And the blood belongs to one of his associates who thought attacking my men was a good strategy. He's alive, in a hospital, and cooperating with authorities about the Osaka syndicate's operations. Minho moved closer, his voice softening. It's over, Adaze. Marcus can't hurt us anymore. Adaze felt tears spill over, relief, exhaustion, gratitude. You didn't kill him. I promised I'd find another way. I keep my promises. Minho pulled her close, careful of his injury. But Adaze, I won't lie to you. The threat of what I could do to him, what my reputation suggested I would do, that's what made him sloppy, made him run. My violence, even the potential of it, is what kept our children safe. That's the reality of my world. I know, Adaze whispered against his chest, and I accept it. All of it. You. The sound of small feet thundering downstairs interrupted them. 5 children appeared, their faces alight with relief and questions. They surrounded Minho, and he crouched down despite the obvious pain, gathering them all close. "Is the bad man gone?" Kira asked. "Gone," Minho confirmed. "You're safe, all of you." "Did you kill him?" Zion asked with disturbing casualness. "No, I did something better. I made sure he'll spend the next 20 years wishing I had." Minho looked at each child in turn. "You need to understand something. I'm not a good man. I do things your mother wishes I didn't. But everything I do is about protecting this family. You don't have to approve of my methods. You just have to know you're safe." "We know, Daddy," Naya said, hugging him fiercely. "We've always known." That night, after the children were finally settled, after the last questions were answered and the last fears soothed, Adaze found Minho on the balcony. He'd showered and changed, the blood washed away, but exhaustion lined his face. "How's the shoulder?" she asked. "Screaming. Dr. Han is going to kill me when he finds out I spent the afternoon coordinating a takedown instead of resting." Minho turned to face her. "Your board tried to push you out today." "How did you, of course you know. Your people are everywhere." Adazi sighed. "They think I'm a liability because of you." "Then they're fools. You built that company. They're just parasites profiting from your brilliance." Minho was quiet for a moment. "I can fix it. Make some calls. Remind certain investors that opposing you would be unwise." "No," Adazi said firmly. "I fight my own battles, Minho, but thank you for the offer." "The offer stands. Always." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Marry me." Adazi pulled back, staring at him. "What?" "Marry me," Minho repeated. "Not because of the children, though they're reason enough. Not because of threats or convenience or strategy. Marry me because I love you. Because you're the only person in 20 years who's made me want to be better than what I am. Because our children deserve to see their parents choose each other every day, despite all the reasons we shouldn't work." "That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard," Adazi said, but she was smiling through tears. "I'm not a romantic man. I'm a criminal who somehow got lucky enough to have you walk into my life twice. Once when I was too stupid to appreciate it. Now when I know exactly how precious you are." Minho's voice dropped. "So yes, it's not romantic, but it's true. Marry me, Adazi. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worth the risk." "You're impossible," Adazi whispered. "Dangerous, morally complicated, and probably going to give me a heart attack with worry." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," Adazi said, and kissed him before she could overthink it. "But Minho, if we do this, we do it right. I want my children to grow up seeing love that's honest. That means no more secrets, no more half-truths. If you're planning something dangerous, you tell me. If your world threatens us, you tell me. We face it together." "Together," Minho agreed, "though I reserve the right to keep certain operational details vague. Some things you don't need to know." "Then I reserve the right to be furious when I find out anyway," Adazi countered. "Fair enough." Minho's smile was genuine now, transforming his face into something younger, less burdened. "Should we tell the children?" "In the morning. Tonight, let's just be us. 2 people who somehow found their way back to each other despite impossible odds." They stood on the balcony as Seoul's lights twinkled below. 2 people from different worlds who'd created something entirely new. It wouldn't be easy. Minho's empire would always cast shadows. Threats would emerge. But they'd face them together. A fierce Nigerian woman who'd turned shame into empire, a Korean criminal who'd learned to be human again, and 5 extraordinary children who'd somehow made the impossible possible. 6 years later, the Kong residence in Hanam-dong was nothing like Adaze's modest house in Pyeongchang-dong. This was a compound. Elegant, secure, and large enough to house a family of 7 plus the security team that Min-ho insisted was non-negotiable. Daisy had fought it initially, but after 2 more attempts on Min-ho's life and one terrifying incident where someone had tried to grab Leo outside his school, she'd conceded. Safety mattered more than pride. 14-year-old Zion sat in his father's study, reviewing financial reports with the kind of focus that reminded Adaez painfully of Min-ho. Her oldest son had inherited his father's strategic mind and, worryingly, his interest in the family business. Not the legitimate pharmaceutical operations. Zion understood exactly what his father really did, and instead of being horrified, he was fascinated. "You can't let him get too deep into your world," Adaezi said that evening, finding Min-ho in the same study after Zion had left for dinner. "He's 14, Min-ho. He should be thinking about video games and school, not supply chain logistics for your empire." "He's thinking about both," Min-ho said calmly. "And Adaez, we can't protect him from what he is. He's my heir. Someday, hopefully many years from now, he'll need to understand how everything works. He could choose a different life, become a doctor, a lawyer, anything legitimate." "He could," Min-ho agreed, "and I'll support whatever he chooses. But Zion is like me. He sees systems and strategies. He understands power dynamics instinctively. Trying to keep him from that is like trying to keep water from flowing downhill." Daisy hated that he was right. She saw it too. The way Zion processed information, calculated angles, understood violence not as chaos but as a tool. Her baby was becoming his father's son, and she couldn't decide if that was tragedy or inevitability. The girls, at least, seemed determined to prove that biology wasn't destiny. Naya wanted to be a human rights lawyer, much to Min-ho's amusement and pride. Mira was passionate about art and spent hours painting in the studio Min-ho had built her. Kira had discovered a talent for music and played piano with the kind of dedication that suggested a future in performance. And then there was Leo, who'd shocked everyone by announcing he wanted to join the police academy after graduation. The irony of Kang Min-ho's son becoming a cop wasn't lost on anyone. "Let me understand this," Min-ho had said when Leo first announced his intention. "You want to join the organization that's been trying to arrest me for 20 years? I want to make the system better," Leo had said stubbornly. "You always say the system is corrupt because good people don't enter it. So I'm going to enter it. Be the good person." Min-ho had laughed, genuinely laughed, and told Leo he was proud of him. Then he'd quietly ensured that Leo's acceptance to the police academy would be based purely on merit, with no interference from the Kang family influence. If his son wanted to be a cop, he'd do it honestly. Okoye Technologies had weathered the scandal and emerged stronger. Daisi's board had learned the hard way that trying to push her out was a mistake when several key investors suddenly backed her with unwavering support. She suspected Min-ho's influence, but had never asked for confirmation. Some battles, she'd learned, were won behind scenes she didn't need to see. Her relationship with Obinna had remained professional, though strained. He'd stayed on as head of security out of loyalty to the company, and Adazi suspected some lingering hope that she'd change her mind about Min-ho. She'd made it clear that wouldn't happen. She and Min-ho had married in a private ceremony 6 months after Marcus's arrest. Small, intimate, just family and closest friends. Obinna had attended, his face carefully neutral, and had shaken Min-ho's hand with genuine, if reluctant, respect. "Take care of her," Obinna had said quietly. "She deserves the world." "She deserves better than me," Min-ho had replied, "but I'm selfish enough to try anyway." Now, 6 years later, Adaze watched her children navigate their teen years with the strange duality of normal adolescence and extraordinary circumstances. They had boyfriend troubles and homework stress and friend drama, but they also had security details and the knowledge that their father was one of Asia's most powerful crime lords. The current crisis involved Naya's boyfriend, a boy named Kim Jae-seung from one of Korea's wealthiest families. Minho had done his usual extensive background check and found nothing concerning, but he'd still pulled Jae-sung aside for a conversation that had left the poor boy pale and shaking. "What exactly did you say to him?" Daisy demanded after Jae-sung had left, looking traumatized. "Nothing threatening," Minho said innocently. "Just explained what would happen to him and his family if he ever hurt my daughter. Very factual, very calm. Minho. He needed to understand expectations. Now he does." Minho seemed entirely unrepentant. Besides, Jae-sung is a good kid, respectful, smart, genuinely cares about Naya, but he should have a healthy fear of disappointing her. Surprisingly, the conversation hadn't scared Jae-sung away. 2 days later, he'd returned with flowers for Naya and a gift for Minho, a first-edition book on Korean history that must have cost a fortune. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Kang," Jae-sung had said with remarkable courage, "but I love your daughter, and I'm not scared of you." "You should be," Minho had said, "but I respect the honesty." That evening, Adaze found Jae-sung in the living room with Naya, both of them laughing over something on their phones. She saw the way he looked at her daughter. Genuine affection, respect, the kind of regard that had nothing to do with the Kang family power or wealth. Just a teenage boy who thought Naya hung the moon. Maybe it would last, maybe it wouldn't. But watching them, Adaze felt hope. Her children were growing up in impossible circumstances, but they were still capable of normal love, normal joy. Minho's world hadn't completely consumed them. Later, after the children were in bed and the house was finally quiet, Adaz found Minho in their bedroom, reviewing reports on his tablet. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face still made her heart skip after all these years. "Come here," he said, setting the tablet aside. Adaze climbed into bed beside him, curling into his side with familiar ease. His arm came around her automatically, holding her close. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "This life? Us?" "Every day," Minho said, and when she tensed, he continued, "I regret that I didn't meet you differently, that our children have to live with security details and background checks, that you married a criminal instead of someone worthy of you. But regret us? Never. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Adaze. You and those 5 miracles we somehow created." "They're growing up so fast," Adaze whispered. "Sometimes I miss when they were little. When the biggest crisis was Kira losing her favorite stuffed animal or Leo refusing to eat vegetables." "They're still our babies," Minho said. "Just taller, more complicated babies who can hack corporate databases and give their father gray hair with dating choices." Adaze laughed despite herself. "You don't have gray hair. Give Zion strategic planning another few years. I'll be completely gray." Minho pressed a kiss to her hair. "But seriously, they're good kids. Strong, smart, kind. We did well." "You did well," Adaze corrected. "I was terrified you'd be a terrible father. Instead, you're remarkable. Patient with their questions, present for their events, protective without being smothering. They adore you." "The feeling is mutual." Minho was quiet for a moment. "I need to tell you something. About the business." Adaze tensed slightly. "What about it?" "I'm transitioning out. Not completely, that's impossible. But I'm moving more operations to legitimate channels, stepping back from the riskier aspects. Tae-sung is taking over more day-to-day operations. I'll maintain oversight, but I'm removing myself from situations that could put me in jail or get me killed." Adaze pulled back to look at his face. "Why?" "Because I want to see them graduate, want to walk my daughters down the aisle someday, want to meet grandchildren and grow old with you. I can't do that if I'm dead or in prison." Minho's hand came up, cupping her face. "You were right 6 years ago. I had to choose. The monster or the father. I'm choosing father, choosing you, choosing this family over everything else." Tears spilled down Adaze's cheeks. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "Don't expect it to happen often," Minho said, but he was smiling. "I'm still not a romantic man." "You're my romantic man," Adeyezi corrected, and kissed him, soft, sweet, full of 6 years of love and struggle and choosing each other despite impossible odds. Naya's 18th birthday party was held at the Kang compound, a lavish affair that drew Seoul's elite, extended family from Nigeria, and a security presence that would have made small nations nervous. Adais watched her daughter, her firstborn, her brave girl, move through the crowd with grace and confidence. Jae-sung stayed at her side, still somehow dating Naya after 4 years, still looking at her like she was the most important person in any room. "She's so grown up," Adaizi said to Minho, who stood beside her observing their children. "How is she 18 already?" "Time doesn't stop, even when we want it to," Minho said quietly. "But look at them, all 5. They're extraordinary." They were. Zion had just been accepted to Seoul National University's business program, with plans to eventually join the legitimate side of his father's empire. Naya was heading to law school in the fall. Leo had his police academy acceptance. Mira and Kira still had a few years of high school, but they were thriving in their respective passions. Against all odds, against every obstacle, they'd built something good. A family, a life. Love that had survived scandal, violence, and the weight of impossible circumstances. "Alma, Daddy," Kira called from across the room. "Come here, we have a surprise." Adais and Minho exchanged glances and made their way to where all 5 children had gathered with suspiciously innocent expressions. Naya stepped forward holding a wrapped box. "We wanted to give you something," she said, "all of us together, to thank you for everything, for making this family work even when it shouldn't have, for showing us what love looks like even when it's complicated." Adesi opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was a photo album, beautifully bound, clearly professionally made. The first page showed a picture she'd never seen before, her and Minho at Club Azure 10 years ago, captured by some security camera. She was laughing at something, and Minho was looking at her with an expression that could only be described as wonder. "How did you—" she began. "We have our ways," Zion said with his father's mysterious smile. "Keep looking." The album chronicled their journey, from that first night to the children's birth to their chaotic early years. Photos Adais had thought lost or destroyed, images that told the story of a family that shouldn't have existed but refused to be denied. The final page held a new photo, taken just last week, all 7 of them together, smiling, whole. And beneath it, in beautiful calligraphy, were words that made Adais's heart overflow. "Some families are born from blood. Ours was born from miracles. Thank you for teaching us that love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. We love you. Forever, your impossible children." Adesi couldn't speak past the tears. Minho's arm came around her, and she felt his chest shake with emotion he rarely showed. Their children gathered close, 5 souls they'd created against all odds, proof that love could thrive even in darkness. "Thank you," Adais finally managed, "for being you, for being ours, for making every impossible day worth it." "We're the ones who should be thanking you," Naya said. "You gave us everything, even when it was hard, even when the world judged. You fought for us, both of you." The party continued around them, but for that moment it was just their family. 7 people bound by love, blood, and the stubborn refusal to let circumstances dictate their story. Later, when the guests had left and the children were finally in bed, Adais and Minho stood in the garden beneath Seoul's stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting 10 years ago, the same stars that had watched them fall apart and find their way back together. "We did it," Adesi said softly. "We actually made this work." "You made it work," Minho corrected. "I just followed your lead." "That's a lie, and you know it." Adais turned to face him. "We made it work. Together. The Nigerian woman who refused to be defined by her worst moments, and the Korean criminal who learned to be human again. We chose each other every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And I'd choose you again, Minho said. Every time, in every life. You're my miracle, Adize. You and those 5 impossible children. They kissed beneath the stars, 2 people who'd survived the impossible and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Their story wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and occasionally morally questionable. But it was theirs, and that made it perfect enough. Inside the house, 5 children slept peacefully, safe and loved, and proof that some legacies really were written in blood. But the rarest ones, the ones that lasted, were written in love. 25 years later, Adeze Okoye Kang stood in her garden watching her grandchildren play. 5 of them now. Naya and Jae Sing had 2. Zion had recently become a father, and Mira had twins. They ran through the compound's gardens with the same energy their parents once had, their laughter filling the air with joy. Minho emerged from the house, moving slower now at 63, but still commanding presence. Gray touched his temples. Zion's strategic planning and Leo's police career had indeed provided that gray hair, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Tae-sung just called, Minho said, settling beside her on the bench. He's officially retiring next month. Says he's tired of managing your son's ambitious expansion plans. Our son, Dee's corrected. And Zion learned ambition from you. Fair point. Minho's hand found hers, fingers threading together with the ease of decades. Have I told you today that I love you? Not since this morning, Adeze said. I was starting to worry you'd forgotten. Never, Minho promised. I spent 10 years not knowing what I had. I won't waste another day forgetting to say it. I love you, Adeze, more than I thought possible, more than I deserve. You deserve everything, Adeze said fiercely. You became the man I always hoped you could be. The children adore you. I adore you. Even Leo grudgingly respects you, despite your career choices. He arrested 3 of my former associates last year, Minho said with pride. The boy has integrity. Can't imagine where he got it. From both of us, Adeze said. The best parts of both of us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play, their children gather for Sunday dinner, their family fill the space with life and love. The empire Minho had built was largely legitimate now. Zion and a team of brilliant lawyers had transformed it into something that could pass any audit. The violence was mostly history, though Minho's reputation still ensured certain threats never materialized. Adeze had finally stepped back from Okoye Technologies' daily operations, though she maintained her position as chairwoman. The company had grown beyond her wildest dreams, a true tech giant that employed thousands and continued to innovate. But none of that mattered as much as this: Sunday dinners with their children, watching grandchildren who existed because 2 people had found each other against impossible odds, a love that had survived scandal, violence, danger, and the weight of incompatible worlds. We made something good, Minho said quietly, despite everything. Despite me. Because of you, Adeze corrected. Because you chose love over fear, family over empire, us over everything else. That's what made this possible. Then I chose correctly, Minho said and kissed her forehead. Best decision I ever made. As Seoul's sun set over their garden, painting everything in gold, Adeze Okoye Kang leaned against her husband and felt complete. The journey from that Club Azure night to this moment had been impossible, terrifying, beautiful. But they'd survived it, together. And in the end, that's what miracles were, not the absence of struggle, but the choice to love despite it. Their story was complete, their legacy secure. And 5 impossible children, now adults with families of their own, carried forward the lesson their parents had taught them. Love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be fierce enough to survive the impossible. And theirs was. Thank you for following the journey of Kang Min-ho and Adaeze Okoye, from one night of impossible passion to a lifetime of impossible love. Their story proves that sometimes the most broken people create the most beautiful families.